Good morning, guys. Today we're going to continue talking about the Great Depression. We learned last time that the Great Depression started on October the 29th, 1929, when the stock market crashed. People lost their savings. 1 out of every 4 Americans was unemployed. People were losing their homes, losing everything they had, living in homeless communities named after the president, Herbert Hoover. Things were not going well for America. We're going to learn today that Franklin Roosevelt is elected president, and he's going to begin working on a plan he calls the New Deal to help Americans during the Great Depression. So when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected, he immediately began working trying to help get the country back on its feet. He came up with a plan that he called the New Deal. He wanted to put Americans back to work and end the Depression. His New Deal had 3 main goals, or things he wanted to accomplish. First of all, he wanted to provide help to those people that were suffering in poverty. That is, giving people jobs, giving people ways to earn money so that they could begin pulling themselves out of poverty. He wanted to help get the country or our nation out of the Great Depression. And most importantly, he wanted to create programs that would prevent our country from ever having to go through a depression again. Part of his New Deal was a program called the CCC. As you can see in this picture, there are men working. It looks like they're digging in the dirt. This program worked to give young men a job. It was run very similarly to the Army. They had uniforms. They would sign up for a certain amount of time. They all lived together in bunk houses, similar to Army barracks. And their job was to help build parks, help plant trees, and conserve our land. Roosevelt realized that if he put people to work in factories, that was not very helpful because people weren't buying the goods produced in a factory. But if he could pay people to work on things around the country to help build the country's parks, to help preserve their battlefields, that this would be a great situation. You can see work from the CCC locally if you visit Fort Mountain State Park. They built a fire tower there. You can also, if you visit Cloudland Canyon, there's some walls that the CCC built. So the projects that they worked on in the 1930s are still around for us to enjoy today. And the CCC gave jobs to over 3 million young men. Another program Roosevelt created under the New Deal was the WPA. This was the largest of his New Deal programs, and this provided jobs to 8.5 million men. That was a lot of people that were given jobs. And this program worked building public buildings such as libraries. It also sponsored artists and musicians. A lot of murals or large, beautiful paintings were painted on the sides of buildings by the WPA. A third program was called the TVA. If you're noticing, all of these have letters that they go by. This program was designed to help the Tennessee Valley. We are right there at the Tennessee Valley where we live right here in Dalton. If you ever hear on the news, they talk about the Tennessee Valley weather. We are right here in the Tennessee Valley. The Tennessee Valley Authority, which still exists today, TVA, you may have heard it referred to as that, was created by Franklin Roosevelt as part of his New Deal. This program was designed to build dams on a lot of the rivers that are in this area, and these dams were then used to generate power. This program also worked to help support farmers. So Franklin Roosevelt worked very hard to help the American people and to provide them with jobs. The American people did not want a handout. They didn't want someone to give them something. They wanted to earn money. So these programs allowed them to work and earn money that they could then send back home and help support their families. These programs go on through the 1930s, though we're going to learn later that really the Depression did not end until the beginning of World War II. to. But these definitely were a step in the right direction thanks to Franklin Roosevelt. Now, we've talked a lot about the Depression, the Great Depression in the 1930s in America over the last several lessons. But there were other things going on in America besides the Depression. Americans needed a distraction. They needed something to look forward to. They needed people to become heroes. And so we're going to talk about 3 particular people that rose to fame during the Great Depression for the wonderful things that they did. The first one is a man by the name of Duke Ellington, and Duke is a famous musician and a composer is the person that writes music. He was famous for playing jazz music, swing music, and blues. He wrote over 1,000 songs. Now, in the 1930s, people are going to begin having a radio in their home, and so for the first time, they're able to really listen to different styles of music, different musicians, and so Duke Ellington is going to become famous. His music is going to be heard on the radio, and millions of Americans are going to know his name and definitely know his music. Another famous American during this time is from our state of Georgia, and that is a lady by the name of Margaret Mitchell. Now remember, times were very hard during the Great Depression. People were suffering, people were scared, people had to be courageous. And Margaret Mitchell writes a book called Gone with the Wind. And Gone with the Wind is a story of a lady named Scarlett O'Hara, and Scarlett lives in the South on a plantation, and the book, which then becomes a movie, tells her story before the Civil War, during the Civil War, and then after the Civil War during Reconstruction. Scarlett O'Hara is a very strong character, and she has to be brave, she has to be courageous, and she has to persevere. So a lot of Americans were able to make a connection to her. They were inspired by her because things were hard for her in this book, Gone with the Wind. Even though the country is in an economic depression, people didn't have a lot of money, this book sold 1 million copies in just 6 months. So even though people were struggling for money, they found the money to read this book. It then goes on to become an Academy Award-winning movie written by a Georgia native, Margaret Mitchell. And our third famous American that we're going to talk about is a man by the name of Jesse Owens. Jesse was a track athlete. He was a tremendous runner. He was probably the fastest person in the world at that point. He went to the Olympics. The Olympics were held in Berlin, Germany. And we're going to be learning in the next few weeks about Germany during World War II and a man by the name of Adolf Hitler. Well, keep his name in mind because we're going to come back to him. Adolf Hitler had a belief that his fellow countrymen in Germany were better, they were superior, and that they were the best at pretty much anything you could think of. Well, during the Olympics, Jesse Owens is going to prove that Hitler is not correct. He wins 4 gold medals and wins track event after track event, defeating the Germans. Now this is really going to upset Adolf Hitler. And remember that name, like I said, because we're going to talk some more about him. But Jesse becomes a hero for his tremendous athletic ability. And when he returns to the United States, he is a hero, but unfortunately he is going to face some discrimination. He's going to be treated differently because of the color of his skin, even though he is this Olympic gold medalist. So these are our 3 famous Americans, Duke Ellington, Margaret Mitchell, and Jesse Owens, and they all in their own way gave Americans a distraction, hope, things to look forward to, other things to be interested in during the Great Depression, and allowed them to have some enjoyment in a very, very difficult time period. Later today in your activities, you are going to work on creating flyers for these famous Americans. So if you need to look back at this PowerPoint presentation to get more information on them, that is wonderful. Thank you guys, and I will see you next week where we are going to begin talking about the events leading up to World War II. Have a great day.